My today's video is on Promissory Note. I am Manchan Tripathi, Assistant Professor, IMS UC Campus, Ghaziabad. So first let me discuss what is Promissory Note. So how we can define Promissory Note? There is a definition. According to Section 4 of Negotiable Instrument Act 1881, a promissory note is an instrument in writing containing an unconditional undertaking signed by the maker or to pay a certain sum of money only to or to the order of a certain person. So basically an written document which is unconditional undertaking signed by the maker to pay a certain sum of money or to the order of a certain person. So this is the promissory note. But the promissory note is not including the bank note or the currency note. So basically, negotiable instrument are of different kind. One kind is the promissory note. So promissory note is a written document which should be unconditional and should be signed by the maker and payee too. They need to promise to pay a sum of the money to a person. The person should be certain. This is the specimen of or you can say the format of promissory note. So you can see here the amount is written, the place is written and the date is written, and the language of promissory note should be like on demand. I promise to pay Ramesh, son of Ramlal of Meerut, or order a sum of rupees 10,000 for value received to Ramesh and the address of Ramesh, and SD signed by drawer, that is Sanjeev, and stamp. So basically this is the specimen of the promissory note. The amount of the money for which the promise is made should be mentioned here, that is of 10,000. You can see in the writing also here 10,000 is fixed. So this is the place, New Delhi, and this is the date, and to whom the amount is paid, that is the payee. I'll discuss later on. So the name of payee and the address of payee should be mentioned in promissory note, and the person who is making the promissory note, the person is known as maker. So in this case, the Sanjeev is the maker and there should be a stamp according to the Indian Stamp Act. So we'll discuss these all details one by one in forthcoming slides. So let me talk about the different parties involved in the promissory note. So there are the involvement of two parties. One party is the maker and another party is the payee. As I told you in the previous slide, the person who was making the promissory note, there was the sign of Sanjeev. So Sanjeev was the maker in the previous example or the format I have shown in the previous slide. So who is the maker? The person, or who is the drawer? The drawer or maker is the same. The person who is making the promissory note is the maker, and payee to whom amount is payable is the payee. So basically the maker is the person who make a note or promise to pay the amount stated therein. There may be one or more maker of the promissory note. Payee, the person to whom amount is payable, that is the payee. So there is the involvement of two parties in promissory note. Maker may be more than one. Please remember this thing, maker may be more than one. So these are all. Now let me talk about the essentials of the promissory note. So first essential, there must be in writing. It must be in writing. So a promissory note has to be in writing. An oral promise to pay does not become a promissory note. If we are making promise to a person that I'll pay you rupees 10,000 orally, so that is not promissory note. Promissory note is when we are making a promise in a written form. Let me discuss an example with you. Let's suppose X is making a promissory note. Fine. Like I promise to pay X, I promise to pay Y, X is making promise to Y, or order rupees 5,000 or rupees 5,000. I acknowledge myself to be indebted to Y in rupees 2000 to be paid on demand for value received. So this is a promissory note. Why this is a promissory note? Because everything is written. So second essential would be it must contain a promise or undertaking to pay. So promissory note must have a language in which a maker is making a promise to pay a sum of money. So you can read it out in the slide also. There must be an express promise to pay. The promise must be expressed. It should not be implied. Or we can say a mere acknowledgement of debt is not a promissory note. If you are just acknowledging that I have borrowed a particular amount of money from person X, you are just acknowledging it. So that is not the promissory note. Promissory note is clearly mentioned that if you are making promise or undertaking to pay a fixed amount to a certain person, that is the promissory note. Otherwise, that would not be the promissory note. Let me talk about an example. Let's suppose X acknowledge himself to be indebted to Y in rupees 1000. So this is not a valid promissory note, because here in this example, X is acknowledging himself that he has borrowed a loan to Y or to Y from Y the rupees of 1000. So this is not a valid promissory note. Essentials of the promissory note. The promise to pay must be unconditional. If a person X is making promissory note and making a promise to Y just to pay a certain amount of money, it should be unconditional. There should not be mentioned any condition for making a promise to pay. Let me talk about the slides, the content written on the slide. A promissory note must contain an unconditional promise to pay, as I discussed earlier. The promise to pay must not depend upon the happening of some uncertain event, that is a contingency or fulfillment of a condition. So basically, first point says that the promise to pay should be unconditional, or the promise to pay must not be depend upon the happening and non-happening of an event. How? I will be illustrating through an example. Let's suppose X is making a promissory note. I promise to pay Y rupees 1000 10 days after my marriage with W. So in this case, there is a condition fixed after my marriage with W. If he is not be marrying with W, so definitely he will not be paying rupees 1000 to the Y. So there is the condition applied in the promissory note. While we are saying what we were saying for being a valid promissory note, there should not be any condition mentioned. Another point, I promise to pay Y rupees 1000 when I am able to pay. If X is making promise to Y to pay rupees 1000, but the condition applied, I am able to pay when I'll feel like or I'll be capable to paying rupees 1000 to Y. So this is not promissory note, because it is clearly mentioned that the promissory note to pay must be unconditional. There should not be any condition fixed over here like here. There should not be, the payment or the promise should not depend on the happening and non-happening of event like this. In this case, after my marriage with W, if marriage will happen, or you can say the X is able to marry with W, then only he'll be paying rupees 1000 to Y. Otherwise, he'll not be paying the rupees 1000 to Y. So this is the contingency situation. So the promissory note will not depend upon the happening or non-happening of any of the event. So the promissory note should be unconditional. Same I have written over here. The above instruments are not valid promissory note. The above instruments are not valid promissory note. Why? As the payment may depend upon the happening of an uncertain event which may never happen. As a result of the sum may never become payable. So this is the fourth point. It must be signed by a maker. As you know, any agreement, any contract or anything, written document, until not signed by the person is not valid, will not be considered as a valid one. So similarly, promissory note should also be signed by a maker who is making a promissory note. If the maker is illiterate, if a maker is not able to sign, so his thumb impression will be sufficient or will be acceptable. So same thing written in the slide, it must be signed by the maker. In case the maker of pro note is illiterate, his thumb impression is sufficient. So for the same I have spoken. So now let me talk for the fifth point. The maker must be a certain person. The maker must be a certain person. The instrument whomsoever making it, he or she should be a certain person. He must be having a name. He must be having a address too. So basically, the instrument must itself indicate with certainty who is the person or are the person engaging himself or themselves to pay. So person should be certain. So there is the involvement of another party. In the previous point, fifth point, we have spoken the certainty of the maker. So in sixth point, I would like to talk about the certainty for the payee also, to whom you are making a promise to pay. In the promissory note, he should also be certain. He must be having a proper name. He must be having a proper identity. Any fictitious person is illegal and void. So any imaginary personality, for any imaginary personality or a person, if you want to make a promissory note, so that will be invalid and illegal, because there is a necessity of making valid promissory note of a certain payee to whom you are going to pay a amount. Seventh point. Seventh essential for being a valid promissory note is the legal tender of money. Legal tender of money we have spoken several times in classroom also. We talked many of the times in classroom also. So once again I would like to talk about the legal tender of money. The promise to pay must be in legal tender of money in India. What is the currency acceptable in India? That should be the legal tender of money. So you cannot make a promise to pay in old coins or a currency which is not in flow in India. Like, it will be invalid if it is payable in foreign money or the goods. So if you are making a promise to pay any foreign currency, so that will be invalid promissory note. Or you are making a promise to pay any commodity or the goods, that also be the invalid promise. You can see in the example, X promise to pay Y $100 at Mumbai. So because we have already told that the promissory note should be having the floating currency of the India, that is the rupees. So because here the currency is in dollar, so this promissory note will be invalid, or this promissory note would not be valid. Or X promise to Y rupees 1000 and a laptop, because it is the condition of X is making promise to pay Y rupees 1000 and a laptop too. So basically this promise is also not be considered as the valid promissory note, because in first case rupees 100, if there will be written rupees 100, so we can say this is the valid promissory note. Or if there will be we are just saying that X is making promise to Y just to pay rupees 1000 only, so that also be considered as the valid promissory note, because there is the promise of giving laptop from X to Y. That's why this promissory note became invalid. This is the next essential, eighth point. the sum payable must be certain. Whatever amount you are paying or you are making to pay the promise to the payee, the amount should be fixed or amount should be certain. So for a valid pro note, it is also essential that the sum of the money promised to be payable must be certain and defined. So how much money you are going to pay, so that amount should be fixed and defined to, definite to. The amount payable must not be capable of contingent addition or the subtraction. You should not write, or promissory note should not contain a amount, you can say the lump sum amount. There should be the amount for what a person is making promise to pay to the payee. The amount should be fixed. There is a illustration. A, if A want to make a promise to B, or A want to make a promissory note, I promise to pay B rupees 500 and all other sum which shall be due to him. Because half of the line, you can read it again, and all sum which shall be due to him. So because the amount rupees 500 is not fixed, that A is not making a promise to B just to pay the rupees 500. That's why this is not promissory note. In another example, you can see A promised to pay B rupees 500, first deducting there out of any money which he may owe me. So definitely there is not a promissory note containing the fixed amount of just to make a payment to B of rupees 500. That's why these above two promissory note will not be considered as valid one. So both the instruments will be considered invalid one, because the amount A want to pay to B, or A is promising to pay B, is not fixed. This is the 9th point and the last point as the essential of promissory note. So promissory note must be stamped. If you could recollect the PPTs, so I have already shown you in the second slide when I was talking about the different format. I was talking about the format of promissory note. So I told you that there is the I have shown you there is a stamp mentioned in the format. So the promissory note must be stamped according to the Indian Stamp Act. The consideration for and the date and the place of making promissory note need not to be mentioned in the promissory note. So date and fee for making the promissory note should not be mentioned. So just there is a necessity of making valid promissory note is the stamping, and stamping should be according to the Indian Stamp Act. So these all are the essential of promissory note.